Atlanta's early morning air buzzed with a familiar hum of city life just waking up. Captain Naomi Ellis took a deep breath as she slid her silver rental into the parking lot of Maggie's diner. Her usual car was in the shop, and she'd opted for a rental, a sleek silver sedan that blended easily with the early morning commuters. Her mind replayed the night's events, still buzzing from a successful bust of a drug operation that had terrorized the neighborhoods under her jurisdiction. But now, all she wanted was some quiet, a steaming cup of coffee, and maybe Maggie's famous biscuits and gravy. Naomi hadn't even made it to the diner door when she noticed the squad car pulling up beside her, parking abruptly. Out stepped a young officer, early 20s, a stiff posture, and an expression that Naomi recognized immediately, suspicion laced with prejudice. As he approached, Naomi gave him a brief nod, hoping he would keep things cordial. But his stance only grew more rigid as he scrutinized her, his hand inching toward his radio as if he were preparing to call for backup. "Ma'am, step away from the vehicle," he ordered, his voice laced with cold authority. Naomi raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me," she asked, irritation bubbling under her calm exterior. "You fit the description of a suspect we've been looking for," he said, barely meeting her gaze. "Need to see your license and registration." Naomi could already sense where this was going. She'd seen it happen countless times, heard the stories from family and friends, from young recruits fresh out of training who weren't shielded by a badge or a title. But this wasn't supposed to happen to her. Not here. Not in her city. The thought made her stomach twist with anger. Keeping her composure, she handed over her license. "I'd like to know the reason for this stop, officer." She glanced at his badge, Thompson. The young officer barely glanced at the license before pocketing it with a look of disdain. "Step away from the vehicle," he repeated, his tone harsher now, more accusatory. Naomi's temper flared, but she forced herself to breathe. "I'm Captain Naomi Ellis of the Atlanta Police Department. I suggest you take a moment to verify my identity before proceeding any further." Her tone was calm but authoritative, and she hoped it would be enough to make him back down. But Officer Thompson's face twisted with a sneer. "You think you can just throw around a fake title and get out of this? We don't do special treatment here." He moved closer, reaching for his handcuffs. The audacity, the blatant disregard, stunned Naomi, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew the consequences of escalating, but the humiliation gnawed at her. As he roughly spun her around to cuff her, a crowd had begun to gather, whispers turning into murmurs of concern and confusion. Several people were pulling out their phones, recording the encounter. Naomi's face burned with a mixture of anger and shame. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was a public dehumanizing display that tore at everything she had worked to build. "Is this necessary, officer?" she asked, struggling to keep her voice steady. "Quiet," Thompson snapped. "You're under investigation." "Investigation for what, exactly?" Naomi's tone held a steely edge, challenging him to answer. Officer Thompson didn't respond. Instead, he began guiding her toward the police cruiser, ignoring the murmurs and stares from the gathering onlookers. Naomi's mind raced with anger and a simmering sense of betrayal. She had always believed that her hard work, her dedication, had set her apart, that she would be treated with the respect she had earned. Yet here she was, reduced to just another face in the crowd, judged not by her achievements but by assumptions rooted in ignorance. As Thompson pushed her into the back seat, Naomi glanced out the window, her gaze falling on the faces watching her. She knew that, to them, she was just another black woman subjected to the whims of a power-hungry officer. The realization was a bitter pill to swallow. The ride to the precinct was silent, save for the crackling of the police radio and the occasional murmurs from Thompson as he gave terse updates to the dispatcher. Naomi sat quietly in the back, her mind whirring with thoughts. What would her colleagues think when they saw her being brought in like this? How would this affect her reputation, her credibility? When they arrived at the precinct, Thompson led her through the entrance, his grip firm on her arm. Naomi caught the eyes of several officers as they looked up from their desks, some of them pausing mid-conversation to stare in shock. A few exchanged whispers, their expressions ranging from confusion to disbelief. "Captain Ellis," someone finally said, breaking the tense silence. Thompson froze, a flicker of confusion crossing his face before he quickly masked it with a dismissive scowl. "This woman is under investigation," he declared, his voice wavering slightly. But the onlookers weren't buying it. Sergeant Hernandez, a seasoned officer with whom Naomi had shared many long nights on duty, stepped forward, his brow furrowed in disbelief. "Bryce, do you have any idea what you're doing?" he asked, his tone a mixture of anger and incredulity. Thompson looked from Hernandez to Naomi, clearly struggling to piece together what was happening. "She claimed to be someone important," he mumbled, trying to justify himself. "But we can't just take anyone's word for it." "She's your captain, Thompson," Hernandez said, his voice sharp with barely contained anger. "Captain Ellis has been with this department for over a decade, and you'd better believe she's earned her title." Naomi watched as realization dawned on Thompson, his face paling as he took a step back. The crowd of officers that had gathered were now openly staring, their expressions a mixture of anger, pity, and judgment directed toward the young officer. I didn't know," Thompson stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. Naomi took a step forward, meeting his gaze with a look of cold fury. "No, Officer Thompson. You didn't bother to find out." Her words were calm, but the weight behind them was unmistakable. Just then, the precinct doors swung open, and Chief Marcus Hanley strode in, his expression thunderous as he took in the scene. "Captain Ellis, are you all right?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. Naomi nodded, though the anger still simmered beneath her calm exterior. "I'm fine, Chief. But I believe Officer Thompson here has a few lessons to learn about protocol and respect." Chief Hanley turned to Thompson, his gaze hard and unforgiving. "My office. Now." The words were clipped, leaving no room for argument. Thompson hesitated, glancing between Naomi and the chief before finally nodding, his face a mask of shame as he followed Hanley into the office. As they disappeared behind the door, Naomi took a steadying breath, letting the tension drain from her body. She looked around at her colleagues, some of whom offered sympathetic nods, others quietly averting their gaze, clearly uncomfortable with what they had just witnessed. Back in her office, Naomi sank into her chair, exhaustion washing over her. She closed her eyes, trying to push away the anger and frustration that still lingered. She had always known that the path she had chosen wasn't an easy one, that as a black woman in law enforcement, she would face challenges that her white counterparts would never fully understand. But today's incident had cut deeper than she'd expected. It was a painful reminder of the biases that still existed, even within her own department. A soft knock on her door pulled her from her thoughts. Sergeant Hernandez stood in the doorway, his expression a mixture of guilt and respect. "Captain, I just wanted to say," he hesitated, struggling to find the right words. "We're all behind you. What Thompson did was wrong, and we'll make sure he understands that." Naomi nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. "Thank you, Hernandez. I appreciate it." She could see the sincerity in his eyes, and it was a small comfort to know that she had allies within the department. As Hernandez left, Naomi's phone buzzed with messages from colleagues who had heard about the incident, each expressing their support and admiration. One message, in particular, caught her attention. It was from Officer Lisa Reynolds, a young black woman just starting her career in the department. "Captain Ellis, I just want to say thank you. What you did today, it means a lot. Officers like Thompson make it hard for people like me, but you remind us why we're here." Naomi felt a surge of pride as she read the message. She had endured today's ordeal not only for herself but for the officers who looked up to her, who needed to see that justice and integrity could prevail, even in the face of prejudice. A few hours later, Chief Hanley knocked on her door. His expression was somber, a reflection of the gravity of the morning's events. "Captain, I wanted to let you know that Officer Thompson has been placed on probation. He'll be required to undergo sensitivity training and mentorship under one of our senior officers. We can't have this kind of behavior in our department." Naomi nodded, satisfaction settling over her. "Thank you, Chief. This isn't just about me, it's about every officer who faces this kind of treatment. If Thompson can't respect his colleagues, how can he respect the people he's supposed to protect?" Chief Hanley nodded, his gaze filled with respect. "You've done us all a service today, Naomi. You've reminded us of the standards we need to uphold." As the chief left, Naomi felt a sense of peace wash over her. She knew that her actions today would ripple through the department, setting a standard for what was acceptable and what was not. Her story would circulate, not just as a reminder of her rank, but as a testament to resilience, integrity, and the strength to stand up, even when the battle was close to home. In the weeks that followed, the incident became a defining story within the precinct. Officer Thompson's actions were used as a cautionary tale during training sessions, a reminder of the dangers of letting biases cloud judgment. Naomi continued her work with a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that she had made a difference, not just for herself, but for the next generation of officers who looked to her as an example. Her name became synonymous with strength and integrity, a reminder that real authority lay not in a title, but in the respect earned through courage and unwavering dedication to justice. If stories like this one moved you and remind you that tolerance, respect, and justice are values we should all stand for, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Join us as we continue to share powerful stories that challenge stereotypes, break down barriers, and inspire change. Don't miss a single moment. Subscribe now, and let's stand together for a world where every voice matters.